They dragged her out of a PTA meeting like she was a threat. Not a screaming woman, not someone flipping chairs, not someone swinging a fist. A black foster mom in a cardigan, holding a folder so tight her knuckles went pale, pulled from a folding chair while parents froze in that strange silence people get when they're watching something wrong but don't know where to put their hands. And the worst part was the way it happened fast. 1 minute, Renee Jackson was sitting under a banner that said "Welcome Families" in bright school colors. The next, 2 officers were in the room, and a school employee was pointing like Renee was a stain that needed wiping up. This wasn't a bar. This wasn't a parking lot. This was a school cafeteria with PTA flyers taped to the walls. Renee had never been to this school before the foster placement, not because she didn't care, because life was messy, and then suddenly, it wasn't just her life anymore. 3 months earlier, she'd taken in 2 siblings, Malik, 9, quiet in public but restless at night, and his little sister Nia, 6, who smiled at strangers like she was trying to prove she deserved to stay. Renee wasn't new to hard stories. She worked as a home health aide. She'd seen families crumble in slow motion. She'd seen people age into loneliness. But fostering was different. Fostering meant you could do everything right and still feel like you were walking across thin ice because there was always a file somewhere with your name on it. Always a judge you might never meet. Always a caseworker who could say, with one serious phone call, that your home was no longer the best fit. So, Renee did what good foster parents do. She showed up, on time, with paperwork, with patience. She introduced herself to teachers, she signed forms, she learned pickup rules, she learned the names of the people behind the front desk. Because in a school, the front desk is where decisions quietly begin. And she learned quickly that Malik's school had a way of misunderstanding him. Not the cute misunderstandings, the dangerous ones. A disruption note when he asked a question too many times. A defiance mark when he didn't make eye contact. A comment about him being aggressive when his voice got shaky and loud. The way some children's voices get when they're trying to keep themselves from crying. Renee had seen that word before. Aggressive. It was the word people reach for when the baby of seeing a child as a child. The PTA meeting that night was supposed to be simple. Parent involvement, the email said. Discipline policy review, it said. Open floor for concerns, it promised. Renee almost didn't go. She was tired. Malik had homework. Nia had a bath to take. And Renee had already learned that showing up in certain spaces meant being stared at like you were an uninvited guest, even when you were holding the invitation. But Malik's teacher had told her, casually, that the PTA is where things happen. So she went. She wore her best calm, a clean cardigan, simple shoes, hair neatly pulled back, the folder with Malik's paperwork, IEP notes, behavior reports, foster placement letter, her ID. She sat near the middle, not in the front, not in the back. She listened while the PTA president talked about fundraising and field trips and community spirit. A slide showed smiling children. Another slide showed a chart about behavior incidents, like kids were statistics first and people second. Then they opened the floor. Renee raised her hand. Not high, not dramatic. Just enough to be noticed. She stood when called on. She introduced herself as Malik and Nia's foster parent. She said she appreciated the staff. She said she wanted to ask about the discipline policy because she'd noticed defiance being used as a category for things that didn't feel like defiance. Her voice didn't shake. She spoke carefully, like someone speaking near a sleeping child. She mentioned a specific incident report where Malik was written up for aggressive behavior during a reading group. Renee said she'd asked Malik what happened. He'd told her he couldn't find his place on the page, asked for help, and got told to stop making a scene. He'd tried to explain. The teacher wrote him up. Renee asked, politely, what the school's process was for reviewing those reports, and whether foster parents were included in the same communications as biological parents. She asked if there was training for staff on trauma-informed behavior, because foster children often have triggers that look like misbehavior to people who haven't been taught the difference. She asked if a child could be marked defiant for refusing to take a consequence when they didn't understand why they were being punished. Her questions weren't wild. They were the kind of questions that make systems uncomfortable, because systems prefer you to accept what you're given. The room shifted. Renee felt it before she saw it. The PTA president's smile tightened. A white woman in the front row turned her head slowly and stared like Renee had just spoken too loudly in a church. Someone whispered something behind Renee, not words she could make out, but the tone was clear. Who does she think she is? The PTA president thanked Renee in a voice that sounded like it was reading from a script, then said the meeting was not the right place for individual student issues. Renee nodded. She understood that. She wasn't asking them to discuss Malik's private file. She was asking about policy. But before she could even sit, the PTA president added something else. She said the PTA was for parents and guardians on record, and that the school has to be careful about who is allowed in meetings. For everyone's safety. Safety. That word again, thrown like a blanket over a prejudice so it looks respectable. Renee felt heat rise in her neck. She kept her face neutral. She said she was on record. She said she had the foster placement paperwork. She said she had checked in at the front desk. The PTA president asked her to step out to verify things. Renee didn't refuse. She didn't argue. She picked up her folder and walked toward the side. And that should have been the end of it. But as she crossed the room, she saw the PTA president signal to a staff member near the door. Not a wave, not a friendly nod, a quick point, a quick lean-in. 2 minutes later, the door opened again, and 2 officers walked in. Not school staff, police. The room went quiet in that old American way, the way people go silent when they think authority has arrived, and they want to be on the right side of it. The officers looked around. Their eyes landed on Renee instantly. One officer asked for her name. Renee gave it. He asked if she was asked to leave. Renee said she was asked to step out briefly to verify paperwork, and she was willing to do that. The officer turned slightly toward the PTA president, who nodded. Too quickly. The officer told Renee to come with him. Renee said she would, and she started walking. Then, without warning, he grabbed her arm. Not a gentle guiding touch. A clamp. Renee startled. Her folder slid against her chest. And then the second officer stepped in, and suddenly, Renee was being pulled through the rows of chairs, her shoes catching slightly on the legs of folding chairs, while parents pulled their knees in like she was contagious. A child in the corner started crying, the way kids do when adults, Pretend violence is normal. Renee didn't scream. She kept saying calmly that she was cooperating, that she was leaving, that she wanted to know why she was being touched. The officer told her she was resisting. Resisting. Renee felt something cold inside her, because she knew what that word meant in a report. Resisting means you deserve what happened next. In the hallway, they pinned her briefly against the wall near a bulletin board covered with honor roll photos and cheerful posters about kindness. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't happening to her. An administrator came out, face flushed, holding a clipboard. The administrator said Renee was not on the approved list, said she refused to leave, said she was causing a disturbance. Renee said she had checked in. She said she had foster paperwork. She said she had her ID. One officer told her she was being issued a trespass warning. Renee's head buzzed. Trespass warning meant she could be arrested if she came back. It meant she might not be able to pick up her foster kids. It meant the school could call her caseworker and say she caused an incident. And that word, incident, can ruin a foster placement faster than anything, even if you did nothing wrong. Renee asked to speak to the principal. The administrator said the principal was busy. Renee asked for the district contact. The administrator said it would be mailed. Then the officer told her to leave the property immediately. Renee walked out into the parking lot, holding her folder with shaking hands, trying to breathe like a person and not like a hunted animal. She sat in her car for a minute and stared at the steering wheel. The meeting was still happening inside. The slides would keep rolling. The fundraising would keep being discussed. The room would fill with comfortable laughter again. And Renee would be the story whispered later. The black woman who got dragged out. The foster mom who made a scene. The one who must have done something. By the time she got home, the neighborhood Facebook group already had a post. Not her post, someone else's. A blurry photo of police near the school entrance. A caption about PTA disruption. Comments about safety. Comments about these days, you can't be too careful. No one wrote slurs. They didn't need to. The language was clean. The meaning wasn't. Renee didn't comment. She put her phone face down. She fed Malik and Nia dinner. She helped with homework. She got them into bed. Then she sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder again. Foster paperwork, school forms, incident reports, and, at the bottom, a small card the caseworker had given her the first week. District Foster Liaison Contact. Renee called the number the next morning. The foster liaison sounded tired, like she'd heard too many versions of the same story. Renee explained what happened, calmly, in order. The liaison asked one question that made Renee's stomach drop. Did the school file an incident report? Renee didn't know. The liaison said she would check and call back. Renee waited all day with her phone in her hand. When the call came, the liaison told her the school had reported Renee was removed by police due to refusal to comply. Renee closed her eyes. Refusal to comply. The story had already been written. It was just waiting for signatures. That night, Renee did something she'd never done before. She filed a public records request, not because she was trying to be dramatic, because she was trying to survive. Most people don't realize schools have cameras, hallway cameras, entrance cameras, cameras that record in silence and don't care about anyone's story. Renee asked for the hallway footage from the time police entered to the time she left the building. The district responded with a standard message about review and processing. Days passed. Then a letter arrived from the district. They denied the request, citing student privacy. Renee stared at the letter and felt the anger rise again, clean and sharp. They were hiding behind children to protect adults. So she did the next thing. She contacted a civil rights attorney, not a TV lawyer, a local attorney who understood school boards and knew how districts talk on when they're nervous. The attorney listened carefully, asked Renee what she said and what she did. Renee told her. No yelling, no threats, no refusing to leave. The attorney asked if Renee had injuries. Renee said her arm was bruised. The attorney asked if Renee had witnesses. Renee said there were dozens of parents in the room. But witnesses aren't always witnesses when they're afraid to be involved. Then the attorney asked the question that made Renee's chest tighten. Did the school have a school board meeting coming up? Renee checked the district website. They did. Public comment, period. Agenda posted, minutes recorded. The attorney smiled without humor and said they would make the district answer in the place they hate most, in public. The attorney sent a formal letter to the district demanding preservation of footage. That changed everything. Suddenly the district's tone shifted. Suddenly they could locate the video. Suddenly the privacy concerns became, we will review and redact. Suddenly, there was a timeline. The school board meeting was packed. Not because everyone cared about Renee, because everyone loves a spectacle, and a rumor about police dragging someone out of a PTA meeting travels like wildfire in a small community. Renee sat near the back with her attorney. She wore the same calm. Her hands were steady on her lap. In front of the room, the board members sat behind a long desk, all white, clean suits, neutral faces. A few administrators sat along the wall, looking tense. The board chair opened the meeting, moved through routine items, then arrived at the agenda item labeled Public Concerns. Renee's attorney stood. She didn't make it theatrical. She spoke plainly. She said her client, a black foster parent, was removed by police from a PTA meeting after asking policy questions. She said the district's written report characterized her client as noncompliant. She said they requested video to confirm facts. She said the district had the footage. Then she asked the board to watch it. The room murmured. The board chair looked like he wanted to decline. He cleared his throat. He said they had reviewed materials. He said privacy had to be considered. The attorney said the hallway footage contained no students and could be shown. A board member tried to suggest handling it privately. The attorney said the district had already made it public by involving police and filing a report. The board chair looked down the line at his colleagues. Then he nodded toward the technician, and the screen at the front of the room changed. A grainy hallway view appeared. The board watched. Everyone watched. And in that moment, the story the district had written began to die. On the tape, Renee was visible in the hallway, holding her folder. Her posture was calm. She wasn't lunging. She wasn't screaming. Her hands weren't raised. She stood with her shoulders tight but controlled, like someone trying to keep the world from misunderstanding her again. An administrator approached her with a clipboard, speaking quickly. Renee held out her folder. She pointed at a page as if trying to show paperwork. Then the officer stepped in, and Renee turned to walk. To walk. And as she moved, the officer grabbed her arm hard. Renee flinched. She pulled, slightly, not a way to fight, but back in surprise. The officer took that small reflex and used it like justification. He pulled her closer. The second officer moved in. Renee's folder slipped. Papers fluttered to the floor. The administrator didn't try to calm it down. The administrator stepped back and watched, arms crossed. Renee bent slightly, as if to pick up her papers. The officer pushed her against the wall instead. Then the tape showed something else. The PTA president appeared in the hall, walking fast, face tight. She pointed at Renee like Renee was an intruder. She spoke to the administrator, then gestured toward the officer. The officer nodded. And then Renee was escorted out. Not because she refused to leave, but because someone had decided she shouldn't be allowed to remain. The boardroom was silent. Not the comfortable silence of order, the sick silence of exposure. The board chair stared at the screen as if it had personally insulted him. A board member shifted in his seat, jaw clenched. On the tape, Renee was still calm, even being grabbed, even being pushed, even being framed as a problem. When the video ended, the technician froze the last frame. Renee standing in the hallway, folder open, papers scattered, officers too close. The board chair cleared his throat. He began to speak, slowly, about misunderstandings and procedures. Then Renee's attorney asked the simplest question. Why did the written report say Renee refused to comply when the video shows her walking to leave? No one answered immediately. A board member tried to redirect toward safety protocols. The attorney asked why the administrator told police Renee was not approved to be there when she had checked in at the front desk. The superintendent leaned toward his microphone and said they would investigate. Then Renee's attorney delivered the final blow. She said the district's foster liaison had confirmed an incident report was filed. She asked the board if they understood what that could do to a foster placement. She asked them if they understood what it means to put a black foster mother in a file as noncompliant when she did nothing but ask policy questions. The board chair looked down. For the first time all night, he looked like a man who realized his suit didn't protect him from facts. Renee didn't speak that night. She didn't need to. The tape did it for her. 2 days later, the district sent a formal letter. They rescinded the trespass warning. They corrected the incident report. They placed the administrator on leave pending review. They announced mandatory training for staff and school resource officers on foster family rights, de-escalation, and bias. And then, quietly, they did the thing districts do when they want to survive. They asked Renee's attorney if Renee would accept a private settlement and confidentiality. Renee said no, not because she wanted revenge, because she wanted the truth to stay visible. Renee didn't go on TV. She didn't tour podcasts. She didn't become a public figure overnight. She did something older and, in a way, stronger. She kept showing up. She returned to the school the next week to pick up Malik and Nia. Calm, professional, folder in hand. The front desk staff looked different now. Not friendlier exactly, but careful. The PTA president avoided the hallway. Malik, who had been quiet about the incident, asked Renee one night if she was going to get in trouble again. Renee told him she wasn't. Not because the world suddenly became fair, but because she had proof now, and proof changes how people treat you. A month later, the school board held another meeting. They presented new guidelines stating foster parents and guardians with valid documentation have the same access and rights as any parent, and that removal from meetings requires clear cause and administrative approval, not someone's discomfort. They also created a policy that any police involvement at school events must be documented with video review if available. Renee read the policy and felt something shift in her chest. A small relief, a small victory. Because the next foster mother who walked into that room might not be dragged out just because she asked the wrong question. By spring, Malik's incident reports had dropped. Not because Malik changed overnight, because teachers started choosing different words. They started calling Renee before writing him up. They started asking what he needed instead of labeling him. Sometimes change looks like that. Not a parade, a phone call, a softer tone, a child not getting punished for being a child. And the PTA meeting that had begun as a humiliation ended up doing something Renee didn't expect. It showed her exactly what she was fighting. Not a single officer, not a single president, a system that loves comfort more than truth and calls it safety. The hallway tape forced that system to watch itself, and once a community sees something on a screen, sees it clearly, without the spin, some lies stop working. Renee never forgot the moment the board watched the video, their faces, their silence, because that's the moment she learned something that stayed with her. Sometimes the most powerful voice you can have is not your own. Sometimes it's a camera, a cold lens, a simple record, a truth that doesn't care who is speaking. And once it exists, once it's played out loud in a room full of people who wanted you quiet, it becomes almost impossible to drag you out again.